exhibit on the second floor about Howard Hughes, and I'd like to share some of the aspects of that with you. I had promised that we'd be doing a bio of Howard Hughes. This will be an overview of his life and career. Hughes was a visionary, I think a very accomplished aviator. He was misunderstood by a number of people and kind of made out to be an eccentric, difficult to get along with. And if you saw the movie The Aviator, he's really portrayed as kind of a eccentric nut job. And it's unfortunate in that there was a lot more to Hughes's story than the unusual aspects of his personality. He formed the Hughes Aircraft Company in 1932. And look at just some of the accomplishments that were being made by Hughes in the 1930s alone. He set a closed course speed record, 352 miles per hour in the magnificent Hughes H-1 Racer at Santa Ana, which is now Orange County Airport. And the H-1 is now on display in the Smithsonian, the main museum on the Mall in Washington, D.C. If you have a chance to see this, it's in an exhibit room or a hall that is really intimate. It allows you to get right up close to the airplane. The workmanship on this thing, if it was ever at Oshkosh, it would win Grand Champion Racer. It is just a magnificent piece of work. The workmanship, it's a metal fuselage and a wood wing. It's just like a piece of sculpture. It's a beautiful airplane. He set a number of transcontinental speed records, again in the H-1 with the longer wings, flying coast to coast in 1937 in only 7 hours and 28 minutes. He won the Harmon Trophy for those accomplishments. And in 1938, he set a round the world speed record of 3 days, 19 hours and 17 minutes in a Lockheed 14 Super Electra, seen here taking off from Burbank on its way to New York to begin the journey from Floyd Bennett Field in Brooklyn. Hughes had a 3-man crew, and it was quite an achievement to go around the world in less than a week in 1938. He won his second Harmon Trophy, acquired and developed Trans World Airlines, TWA, pioneered the use of Duramold wood construction on an airplane that you're going to see here in a moment, designed, built, and flew the XF-11 photo recon prototype, designed, built, and flew the Mammoth H-4 Hercules flying boat, the world's largest airplane, founded Hughes Helicopter, and designed and built the XH-17, world's largest helicopter at the time. But having said all that, this is the machine that he's best known for, the Spruce Goose, which was not made out of spruce, but that was the nickname that was given to it by the press. And here's a close-up of the Duramold process, which is formed plies of wood. It was made out of birch, not spruce. And look at it looks like a piece of furniture. I should mention that the building that this is housed in is still in Culver City today. It is owned and operated by Google. There were 2 of these buildings side by side. You'll see those in a photo in a little moment. But Google has retained, to their credit, they've retained the exterior and shell of the buildings exactly the way you see it here. And then they've built their modern offices within that space. So they've really respected the history of the buildings, and you can see them if you drive to the Playa Vista development in Culver City, California. The Spruce Goose, or H-4, I'm going to call it the Hercules, proper name, was built in sections, and then those sections were transported on 8 trucks down to the port of Long Beach. Here we see the fuselage going down Sepulveda Boulevard in Torrance. And here's the graving dock, dry dock, but it's the assembly facility where the airplane was put together like a giant model. At lower left, you see a converted PT boat, which was the escort vessel. And here's a close-up. You can see that even the wing floats have their own separate compartments that lead out to Long Beach Harbor. The tower at the top was constructed for this site. Here's the airplane floating free in the mouth of Long Beach Harbor, Terminal Island in the background, 1946. And here's Hughes at the flight engineers station. 8 engines, Pratt & Whitney R4360, 3,000 horsepower, 28-cylinder radials that powered this airplane. Nice close-up of the panel. And I'm going to present this out of order because now we're going to move on to the taxi tests and the flight of the airplane in 1947. But we're going to come back to another aircraft in an episode in Hughes's life in 1946 that bears mention. So we're going to kind of invert this just to keep the continuity of the H-4. On November 2nd, 1947, the airplane was taxied out into Long Beach Harbor, did a series of taxi tests with reporters on board. You see the iconic Breakers Hotel, part of the Long Beach skyline to this day in the background. And after offloading the reporters, except for one, Hughes closed the door, set the flaps at 15 degrees, and made the one and only flight of the airplane. It flew for 1 mile in ground effect, supported by the cushion of air below the wing. And it is thought that he was doing this just to quiet his critics, who were very critical of the fact that he was using government money to build this airplane. It was finished after the war. The idea was that it would be a wood-constructed flying troop transport. Unfortunately, it took so long to build that the war had ended, and he was accused of conducting a government boondoggle. That was not the case as far as I'm concerned. And he flew the airplane straight and level for that 1 mile, primarily because the boosted hydraulic system to boost the controls was not installed in the airplane yet. So it wasn't really fully maneuverable. And he proved his point. The airplane was airworthy. He set it back down and it was never flown again. Now, going back another year, the second airplane that factors into this time period for Hughes was a photo reconnaissance prototype. And it was designed to compete against the Republic XR-12 Rainbow for an Air Force contract for a high performance photo recon airplane. Both these aircraft were powered by the R4360s. Here you see both early prototypes with contra-rotating propellers. And this is a big part of the story. You can look at, again, the beautiful workmanship. This is the engine installation. It's a test stand for the housing of the 4360. And again, you look at the workmanship on just a test article. This is the installation of the twin General Electric turbo superchargers. And here's the first prototype with a constellation in the background. And those are the two buildings that, as I said today, are owned by Google and were used to build the H-4 Hercules. It's an interesting looking machine. Unlike the Rainbow, it had the camera housed in the nose with the camera operator in the rear section of the cockpit. It was smaller than the Rainbow, and of course, a twin engine design versus the 4 engines of the XR-12. And here's a picture. It's said to be a taxi test, but I believe it's the first flight. And the reason I say that is because if you look at the number 2 engine, you can see the props are out of sync. And this became a factor. You can see Hughes in the cockpit. 45 minutes later, this airplane was in deep trouble. The rear propeller on the number 2 engine had seized. That was in reverse pitch, and that was creating a lot of drag, and Hughes could not keep the airplane in the air. He was trying to make the Beverly Hills Golf Course, Beverly Hills Country Club, missed by about a half a mile, and the airplane crashed into a neighborhood. Just miraculously, no one was killed. The airplane was destroyed. Hughes was badly injured and badly burned, but he recovered. 9 months later, he was in the cockpit of the second prototype, which you'll see here fitted with single propellers. And this is interesting. If you're familiar with this area of Southern California, you're looking at the intersection of Centinela and Jefferson. If you saw this area today, you wouldn't believe it. It's quite built up. But Hughes flew the second prototype successfully. Here he is taking off from Hughes Airport. As I mentioned, this is the site of the Playa Vista development. In the background at left would be the Fox Hills Mall. And on top of the bluffs is Loyola Marymount University today. It's a very elegant looking airplane. And again, modeled after the P-38 Lightning with the twin tail booms, but quite a bit larger. About a 425-mile-an-hour top speed, very high performance airplane. A little bit about the designation. In 1946, the original designation was XF-11. F stood for photographic aircraft. And then with the advent of the United States Air Force, the changing of the designations, R became reconnaissance, and this became the XR-11 and the Republic XR-12. In October of 1948, both aircraft were on exhibit at an air show at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Here's the Rainbow parked next to the Hughes airplane. As I mentioned, the Rainbow was a 4-engine aircraft, quite a bit larger, the fastest 4-engine piston-powered airplane to this day at 462 miles an hour at 40,000 feet. However, both airplanes were too little too late for the Air Force mission. Jets were coming into operation, and so conceivably enemy jet aircraft could have attacked these airplanes and they would have been very vulnerable. The answer was to convert that mission to the ER-B-47 Stratojet, seen here. At that time, Hughes was also involved in running Trans World Airline. He was very involved in the creation of the Lockheed Constellation. But in the early 50s, he had dreams of even more futuristic progress. And here he is seen in a rare color photo with the Avro jetliner, which was the first jet, flew 13 days after the British Comet. And I would mention, you see here, Hughes has a mustache, and that connotes the fact that it's after the accident. He was badly scarred, and he grew the mustache to hide the scar on his face after the crash of the XF-11. Here's the jetliner coming in for landing, and it was an interesting airplane, a little too far ahead of its time. The Canadian government canceled the program, and so it never came to be. But Hughes, had it happened, would have had the first jet airliner in the US. Undaunted, he moved on to develop what became the world's largest helicopter, the XH-17. And believe it or not, the name of this craft was the Sky Crane, not to be confused with the Sikorsky Sky Crane today. But here we see Hughes at Hughes Airport with the XH-17. It did fly, powered by 2 General Electric J35 turbojet engines, which put hot air through the rotor blades, and that created the propulsion system for the helicopter. It never went into production, but we went from the world's largest helicopter to one of the world's smallest. And this craft did go into production, was very successful as a trainer and light utility helicopter, the Hughes 300. The first turbine helicopter that Hughes built was the 500 series, seen here flying with the LA County Sheriff. And then an improved, more powerful version, the 500E, with a resculpted nose section. And McDonnell Douglas acquired Hughes Helicopter and created the AH-64 Apache, which is in use today. Hughes Missiles created the Falcon and the Phoenix, seen here on the F-102 and F-14, respectively. But let's look at all the amazing entities that Hughes created in his career that impact our lives to this very day. You had the Hughes Research Laboratories, Hughes Medical Institute, Air Defense Systems worldwide, Hughes Air Traffic Control Systems, also worldwide. Hughes Aerospace created the SYNCOM satellite, world's first geosynchronous communication satellite system in 1963. The ATS-1 in 1966 was the world's first geosynchronous weather satellite. Hughes Space and Communications was an outgrowth of the first company, and they created Surveyor 1, the first soft lunar landing craft in 1966. The Soviets had landed a spacecraft on the moon, but it crashed into the moon. This was an actual controlled landing, much like the Apollo lunar module. The Pioneer series of Venus orbiters and probes in 1978. The Magellan program, again, Venus Exploration System, 1989. The Galileo probe that went to Jupiter. By the year 2000, nearly 40% of the world's commercial satellites were built by Hughes Space and Communications. That company became part of Boeing and Raytheon in the year 2000. But the legacy of Howard Hughes was far and wide. He passed away in 1976, and his work is, as I said, part of our lives today in so many different aspects: aviation, communication, electronics, navigation. And he left a legacy that will really be unequaled in the years ahead. So there you have it, an overview of Howard Hughes and the many airplanes and things that he created. Thank you for celebrating aviation with Mike Machat. Again, just a reminder that we are going to take a hiatus as we focus our efforts on the Museum of Flying. I serve as curator for that entity, and very proud to be a part of a wonderful team of folks who really do a fabulous job celebrating aviation history in Southern California and the Douglas Aircraft Company. Check the website for details. And again, if you haven't subscribed to our channel, please do, and you'll have news of programs that we'll bring to you as time allows. So until our next program, as always, take care.